Welcome to Coach2Scale. This week, Josh Horstmann, operating partner at Francisco Partners Consulting, breaks it down. He talks about hiring smarter, building a virtual bench so your business doesn't crash, and coaching your people to reach their potential through their lens, not yours. Josh also talks about the importance of being present during one-on-ones, why promoting A players, reps to managers isn't always the best idea, and how to identify a runner versus a builder when selecting go-to-market leaders. Josh keeps it real, so don't miss this one. Also, please share your favorite takeaway on LinkedIn. Make sure to subscribe to our Coach2Scale YouTube channel and join our community. Let's take our coaching and leadership skills to the next level together. Let's go.
Welcome to Coach2Scale, how modern leaders build coaching cultures. I'm your host, Matt Bonelli. Join me as we build a community of like-minded professionals who share the belief that effective coaching improves the performance of every team member. Our mission is to help leaders become better coaches. The Coach2Scale podcast is sponsored by Coachum, the world's first AI coaching execution platform that leverages evidence-based coaching to increase quota attainment. And with that, let's get started.
Today's guest is a go-to-market expert, executive coach, and strategic problem solver. He's also a huge mountain biker. From CA to Novell to the Sales Benchmark Index, he's built his expertise at industry heavyweights, and now he's making waves as an operating partner at Francisco Partners. And equally interesting, he's a board member with the Southwest Montana Mountain Bicycle Association. Josh Horstmann, welcome to Coach2Scale.
Great. Nice. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. And yes, looking forward to mountain biking season once this winter gets past us. Right now it's ski season. So, you have the best of both worlds, I guess.
Yeah. So as we talked a little bit before we got started here, but one thing I'm looking to do, you might appreciate this as a mountain biker in a winter ski location up in Montana, is I'm going to rent a fat bike and a fat tire bike. I've never done that. And go out on the trails and the bike. I always thought people were crazy that did that, but yeah, I'm guessing.
I have one. Yeah. It's fun. Yeah, the best part is if you fall, you're usually in something soft. So, you can have even more fun if you want.
That's actually a selling point. All the gear with no idea. So Josh, jump right into it. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You've had a tremendous career. You worked at some great companies, and now you have a unique position where you see all different types of companies under Francisco Partners portcos. But let's talk about myths. Josh, what's a myth in this business of coaching and leading salespeople, sales leaders, that you believe is misguided or maybe even complete BS?
Yeah, I think one of the myths that I see quite a bit, and it's, was part of Francisco Partners Consulting, which is a consulting arm of Francisco Partners, is we work with a lot of executives, and specifically with me being on the go-to-market team, CROs. And I think in some aspects, I saw this in my previous as an operating role, is there's a myth that once you get to a certain level with an organization, you don't need coaching. And a lot of times we make that mistake of, this person was a frontline manager and now they're a second line or a third line, whatever, or they're a C-level executive. They don't need coaching. They've got this thing mastered. And what happens then is they kind of lose touch. They start to cancel calls. They move their one-on-ones. They just don't find time for coaching because, hey, this person's been successful in a role, so they don't need coaching. And I think that's a myth that a lot of folks need to really take a look at and say, no, everyone needs a coach. I mean, look at professionals, right? Everyone from Tiger Woods to Tom Brady, pick an athlete, pick somebody who's successful. They have a coach and they leverage that coach, whether it's for a specific time or a specific part of an area that they need to improve on, right? We have trainers, right? We go and we want to get fit. So my point is, the myth, I think, is that you think when you get to a level, you don't need a coach. And I think that's the wrong mindset to have.
That's awesome. And so true. In fact, I watched something. I think I even wrote about it fairly recently. I was watching a video of Jon Jones, UFC guy, and it doesn't matter if you're a UFC fan or not. I think his comments were insightful after the fight. He won the fight by doing this technical spinning back kick, and the first thing he did was thanked his coaches by name, and he I don't know, he had 10 coaches. Here's the
Yeah.
greatest in his sport, one of the greatest in his sport, and he thanked 10 different coaches, like very specific. In our world, it's almost like you have a coach for prospecting, you have a coach for discovery calls, you have a coach for negotiating, you have a coach for closing, you have a coach for identifying your ideal client profile, whatever it may be. And yeah, he just thanked his coaches, and here's the best in the world. Contrast that, Josh, and I'd like your feedback on this. I remember interviewing folks and talking about, hey, so when your manager coaches you, where do you focus on? And the answer is, oh no, Matt, my manager, he spends time with the people who are struggling. He doesn't need to spend time with me.
Yeah.
Why does that happen?
Yeah, I think so I think first of all, we tend to want to focus on the people that aren't performing and coach them, and we think the analogy of, hey, coach them up, right? Take a C player or a B player and make them an A player, right? There is some truth to that. I think what happens is when people are A players or they're high performers, those are the folks that they do need some type of coaching, but it's important to understand what type of coaching do they need. It's not necessarily maybe deal coaching or forecast or pipeline. I mean, we tend in sales to talk about deals. I mean, we have a one-on-one, and then you and I are going to go in deep in the weeds on deals, and 45 minutes later we've talked about two things, maybe two deals, and we haven't really spent time on what's your career, what are you looking to do, like how are you getting better. So I think we make the mistake sometimes of realizing that A players do need some form of coaching. Like to your point, the best in the world still need some type of coaching. And I think the important thing to do is have that conversation and say, hey, Matt, where do you think you need some coaching? Where are some areas that you'd like to either improve? Is there something that you think you could help the team with? I mean, figure out what that is, and then coach to that going forward for a period of time.
And is there, when you think about that, is there a reason why somebody would say, "Oh, I don't need coaching"? I mean, I know we think that's not the right way to go, but why does somebody think that?
I think people think that. I mean, part of it is I think some of it's just their personality, right? And I think that's a big thing is like understanding folks' personalities, right? And, whether you use a Hogan or Myers Briggs or a DISC or whatever, there's a lot of things that, what is your personality type? And people that are high D's, right? And they're the ones that are very task oriented. Is like, hey, I'm good. I've hit my quota. Leave me alone. Go talk to someone over here who's not. So I think part of it is just their personality style. Some people don't want to be vulnerable and ask for help, right? There's a little bit of, hey, am I going to look bad? Am I now on a list somewhere that I need coaching? I think there's a couple different reasons on why people say, hey, I don't need the coaching, is because whether it's a personality, whether it's a vulnerability, it's an ego. They've been successful in their roles and they don't like to ask for help because they want to try and figure it out themselves, when a lot of times if they'd asked for coaching, they might have gotten somewhere faster. But they just have that type of mindset sometimes that, I think as a leader, we need to kind of understand that and then meet them where they are
Hmm.
and say, okay, Matt, I understand you don't want me the coaching. Why not? And maybe use a couple of examples on, have you been coached before in other areas outside of work, and where have you found success in that?
Well, I love what you just said. I was going to go there. I was going to ask you the question: is leadership culpable? I mean, if someone feels like I don't need coaching, only the people that are struggling, or there's a reason why they don't want to ask for help. And you just talked about how to address those situations when they arise. So I'm assuming you believe management does have a role in creating a coaching culture.
Oh yeah, I mean we do this. I mean in my day to day, I work with multitude of CROs, and I just hosted a roundtable a couple of weeks ago with some of the CROs in our portfolio where we talked about coaching culture starts at the top. And as a leader in an organization and whatever that role is, whether it's in sales or marketing or product, pick the area. Coaching is top down, and some of the best CEOs I've ever worked with, some of the best leaders I've ever worked with, have created that coaching culture, and they're investing in their people. It's not just the numbers; it's how are you thinking about succession of the next set of leaders? How are you thinking about scale of the next leaders? So I think there's a little bit of create it from the top down, and then more importantly, it can't be a, hey, I checked the box. It has to live and breathe. And more importantly, what are you doing to build that culture? And then how are you measuring the success of that culture?
Yeah, awesome. And when we initially spoke, you talked about coaching, and these are my words. I may be missing, paraphrasing a little bit, but you talked about coaching and leading is about making the people around you successful.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, and I've been a coach for many folks across my career, and like I said, I do that on a day to day basis with the portfolio leaders I work with, and I think you have to understand what motivates an individual and meet them where they are motivated. And examples, some people, money is the motivator. Some people, time is a motivator. Sometimes it's recognition. And so I think if you're really having those one-on-one conversations with folks, you need to understand, number one, what is going to motivate them, and then drive some of that performance against what's motivating them, and understand the second piece, which is what is their personality? Like how is the best way to coach them? And I use some of the analogies on assessments, right? Understanding the DISC personality, I'm an I and a D. I is a little bit higher than D, right? D is more for task. I is more around people. So I'm more of an extrovert. I like to talk about, you know, thinking through the best way to have successful people around me. Someone who's task oriented, just like, hey, let's get to it. And so I think you have to understand and take a step back of, number one, what's their personality, what's going to motivate them, and then build a coaching methodology and culture around that going forward.
Is it how important is it to understand that the way you are wired, you're an ID, might be different than someone, than the people on your team? And then on top of that, how important is it to have a diverse group of people on the team in terms of different personalities and styles?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of any successful team, it's a collection of different, individuals, different talents, right? If you use sports, there's all the different position players or what they're doing, and so you can't have everybody be the same. I don't think you're going to be as successful. I think if you understand the strengths and weaknesses, you understand the personalities of where those folks are, you're going to meet them and you're going to say, one of the coaches I think that does an awesome job, he's referred to as a player's coach, is Andy Reid, right? Andy Reid, and I'm a long-suffering Giants football fan right now, but if you look at someone like an Andy Reid, who is a player's coach, he understands the positions and how to best put those positions on the field to be successful. I think you need to do something similar in business, is like take a look at who you have, build a team around it, and understand their strengths and weaknesses. And weaknesses, you try and help them get better, but then maybe leverage the players around them to help lift them up as well.
Well, I'm a homer for the Patriots, longtime Patriots fan. Great
Yeah.
run. Even
Yep.
even though the only blips in the screen for the Patriots over that 20-year run was the Giants,
That's
but
correct. Yep.
the peaks are as high as the
Yep.
valleys are low, right? Um,
That's correct. Yep. Yep. Very quickly.
so one of the things we talked about before also was the importance of hiring people. Again, I'm paraphrasing: hiring people that are better than you on the team. And is and that really doesn't happen all the time. And I don't think anyone purposely says, Josh, I'm going to hire people that are lower than me, that are less skilled than me, so I can be the star of the show. But yet it happens.
Yeah.
Is it, how important is it to hire people, the best people that you can, and hire people that are really better than you are?
Yeah. So I think one way to think about it, even before the people that are better than you, is when you're looking at a role, and I talk about, you and I chatted briefly around what is the competencies of a successful role. And what I mean by that is whether it's a leadership role or an individual contributor role, depending on what, within the organization, is understand the 10 to 12 competencies that are vital for the success. And the way you figure that out is look at some of the people in the A player, mindset, or the people that you can kind of mirror or build that off of. And once you have those 10 to 12 competencies, you build your job descriptions, you build a scorecard, a hiring, kind of bring that through the talent. And so what you're doing is you're understanding the competencies of a role. And then what you're saying is, okay, where do I have gaps? I mean, part of this is around self-awareness. And if you're a leader that doesn't have self-awareness and isn't humble or have the vulnerability, some people do, some people don't. But if you're thinking about how do I get better, or how does my team have gaps, and you build competencies around what a role is successful for, then you're going to naturally start to bring in people that are going to fill those competencies. You're going to have people successful in those roles. And hopefully some of those areas that are, areas you might have or lacking, you're going to fill those people around you that bring everybody up.
100%. Thanks for sharing that. Um, you alluded to the coach. Let's talk about the coaching conversation for a second. And you talked about how some of these evolve into deal conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
and I see that the feedback that we get when we're soliciting, when we're surveying people is, yeah, my one-on-one basically is a forecast call. It's another name for a forecast call. And the other thing that comes up when talking to people about their coaching conversations with their leaders is that, it gets canceled all the time, or I'm in the meeting and my boss is looking at his or her phone and
Yeah.
are taking a phone call. How important is it to be present in these meetings?
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge thing. Think about how that would make you feel. So imagine you and I are having a coaching call and I'm over here on my computer and I'm looking at my phone and, I'm off to I mean, that it makes you as a person feel like, do I really matter? Like, why am I bothering? And so it already is starting to sour that relationship. So I think when you're setting up a one-on-one, number one, I always tell people is, have an agenda when you're going into those calls. And that could be something around as simple as you and I alternate. If I'm coaching or if I'm coaching you, you're sending me an agenda one week, I'm sending you a topic or two ahead of time, right? So we're kind of alternating who is driving the conversation.
Hmm.
I think that's one thing that I think works really well. Two is being present, as you mentioned, is, shutting off the noise around you, having your phone turned off, looking at the computer screen. Don't do it on a phone call because you can get distracted, right? If you have a face to face, we're doing it face to face in a meeting if we're back in the office. I also think too is as you're thinking through the action items from a call, follow up. Hey, Matt, you and I chatted about X, Y, and Z. Looking forward to our next conversation. Here are some things we discussed. I mean, it might take a little bit more time, but you're trying to drive performance. You're trying to invest in your people, and if you're treating it as a task that I can just move or cancel, it makes the other individual feel like, am I really, am I worthy of even having these conversations? And I think there's a stat that said that 75% of people that leave a company leave because of their manager. And I think it's something that you guys actually were showing me a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to some of your colleagues is, people leave for their manager more than they leave about the company. And so I think just having a mindset of, again, coaching culture, what am I going to do in those moments of those one-on-ones, and making it more about the person than just about me checking a box I did my one-on-one.
And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because this is my anecdotal feedback. It's the people that leave aren't the people that are at the bottom. They're not the new people or the struggling people. They're the best people.
Yeah. Yeah, they're probably, sometimes the top people stay because they're making really good money. They've got a nice territory or a name. I mean, they're kind of in that sweet spot. And then the bottom are just kind of hanging on, and maybe they're not being managed out appropriately, which is a whole other topic.
Right.
It's kind of that middle, right? That middle third that's just the ones who are like, hey, I've had enough. I'm going to go look outside. I'm going to go hopefully to some place that's going to value me, not just for what I can do from a performance, but more me as a person, and where do I have the best opportunity to be successful.
Um, you, you talked about coaching, and when we think about it, we think about these scheduled conversations. But let's face it, there's ad hoc coaching. There's
Yep.
coaching on the fly. There's the hallway conversation, the in the car conversation, the catch up at the end of the day conversation. Is there a mix there? What's your thoughts on? I mean, let me be more direct with the question. I often speak to leaders who say, "Well, I don't have weekly one-on-ones. My coaching is ad hoc. I'm always talking to my people." Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I, I think some of the things that you should be thinking about is, I call them micro coaching, right? There's those micro coaching moments. So agree 100%. There's going to be scheduled coaching that you're going to be doing. There's also going to be coaching where it's, you and I just left a meeting. We were talking to a prospect or a client, and I'm going to pull you aside and say, hey, Matt, notice this, notice that, maybe this is something we want to work on. So it's in that moment coaching. There's also the times where, you and I are reviewing something, a document, a proposal, whatever, and I'm going to give you that. So it's not just a one call or one-on-one we're going to have. There's those micro coaching moments along with the ones that are scheduled. I think there's always going to be that mix.
Yeah. You know, you have a lot of experience. I have the gray hair. I have a lot of experience. I've been doing this for a while,
Okay, yeah,
and
yeah, a little bit of gray hair.
I have more than you. Um, it, you learn a lot about not just what to do. I learned about what to do from a lot of people, but I also learned like what not to do
Yeah,
from some folks. And you made me think of it when you say, "Hey, we finished the meeting and we're walking in the hallway, or we got in the car together." And I remember one of the first meetings I took a senior executive to, like my boss's boss type of guy, and I was a frontline manager. Our rep was with me, and we brought in the senior guy. And we get in the car, and he looks at the rep, and he says, "Don't ever effing talk in the same meeting that I'm in. You understand?" I was like,
wow,
well, I was new, like I was in my like late 20s, and I'm like, yeah, I don't
yeah,
think that's the right way to do this.
no, no.
uh,
No, rather than turn the conversation, hey, here's some areas where you might want to get, let's debrief. And I always ask, I think a good way to start those conversations is like, hey, man, how do you think the conversation went?
Excellent. Yeah.
How did it go? What do you think? What went well? What didn't go well? And just help lead them, because sometimes you want to help them come to the conclusion. You don't want to give them the answer all the time. You're trying to get them to change. What would you have done different? Right? If they said this, what's another way you might answer that question? Whatever that looks like.
Fantastic coaching questions, and you learn a lot about the person when based on the answer they give. Like, for
Yeah.
example, I've asked that question, and I've gotten, "How'd you think it went?" "Oh, I thought it went awesome. They're gonna buy by the end of the month." And you're like, that was the worst meeting I've ever been in my life. That was the furthest thing from a decision
Remember that
maker.
self-aware comment? Yeah, yeah. Some people just are. Yeah,
Yeah, but you learn. So, like, what's this person's situational awareness? What's their
yeah.
EQ? Can they read the room? Right? You can learn a lot. Yeah, lots of funny stories too there from that. So, Josh, what's a painful lesson in this crazy business that you've learned along the way that you kind of look back and shake your head at a little bit, but it taught you a lot?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we all have made this mistake that are in leadership, especially in the sales area, is assuming that somebody who crushed their quota as an individual contributor is always going to be the best
Mm.
coach and could be promoted into management. I think we like to think, hey, this person who was an A player hit quota. Hey, let's just promote them, and we love to just kind of promote from within, which I'm a big proponent of. But do they have the competencies to be a coach? And a painful lesson I've seen is I know I have. I've promoted some of the top reps to be managers, and then what do they become? They become a
Super
super
rep.
closer, and they close the deals for their team because they're not thinking about how they can scale and how they can create a coaching culture underneath them. They're more worried about how they're going to hit their number, and when their reps aren't performing or aren't getting it done, rather than coaching them up, they're thinking about, I have to step in and take this deal. And sometimes I'm not saying you can't do that, but I think a lot of times painful lessons are, let's just promote the top rep because we don't want to look externally, or we haven't taken the time to build out the right role of who that candidate should look like.
Well, guilty as charged. I've made that mistake also, probably more times than I care to admit. But a lot of leaders, a lot of frontline managers, Josh, that I've talked to, they were solid A player, individual contributors, great people. They think that's their job. They think their job is to be the super closer. And yeah, I mean, what do you say to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I would say, what's the culture above them? I mean, you talked about the coaching culture from the top down. Is there next level manager, or what is the culture that's being created internally? Is it to say, hey, we've got to get to a number, all hands on deck? You just step over your reps and get the deal done, and maybe that isn't. There's going to be circumstances where you do have to get to the number, but that cannot be the day to day where you're just, my job is to go in and, like, why have a different level? I mean, just go back to having everybody be individual contributors, and drive a number, right? So you can't scale that way, right? And that's where people get burnt out, and that's where you get people that are like, hey, I'm just leaving because I'm just getting frustrated, or there's no career progression, or whatever that looks like. And back to my comment before, which is, when you come to a call with your agenda on one of our one-on-ones, whatever that looks like, one of the conversations, hey, Matt, what's your career look like? Where do you do you want to get into management? Some people don't want to get into management, but get promoted because they're a rep and they're like, they feel bad saying no. But in reality, they like to be in an individual role and hit a number and worry about their quota and not worry about the management side of things. So if you're having those one-on-ones early when you start coaching somebody and figure out, again, where do you meet them? How do they want to be coached? What are they looking for? Then I think you can start to say, okay, you know what, 6 months, 9 months, let's put Matt into a team lead role. Let's see how Matt does first in a team lead before we throw him into the management role, as an example, right? Put a role in there that maybe is like a test to see how they do it if they say they want to go down the management track.
Yeah, that's great, John. You just made me think about something else about a lot of folks that I've worked with over the years that were excellent, like really unbelievable salespeople. They were unbelievable salespeople, but they get to the age where they start to think, do I want to carry a bag for my whole career? And it's almost like they feel like they're being judged. They're making a shitload of money, right? They're
Yeah,
making a ton of
yeah,
money, but they
yeah,
feel like people are looking at them and saying, "Hey, man, you're pick a number 40, and you've been carrying the bag. Maybe you should go to be a manager." And then they feel like, and then they go for it, and they get it because they've been great for years,
pressure.
and then they kind of fizzle out and they're miserable because they
Yeah.
don't want to do that. Have you ever run into that situation? And what advice would you give to that A player salesperson who loves what they do, but they feel like they need to do something else for fear of missing out, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the fear of missing out. I mean, and I would also, I'll answer that question in a second. I also think there's a lot of folks that I've seen go into management roles. They're like, man, why did I do this? Like, I don't, I they're miserable. And then they go back to another individual contributor role, whether it's another company or they ask to go back into something internally. I would say, again, fear of missing out is one thing, yes. But you know what? If you're happy in what you're doing, if you're self-aware and you have the insights and you have the mindset of like, you know what, I'm worrying about what Josh or Matt or whoever wants to be in their happiness, and if they're successful in a role, when that comes up and say, you know what, I'm good. I mean, I'm making a great minute. I'm driving performance. And again, this comes back to when you and I were sitting down 9 months or a year ago or whatever it was, and you said to me, you know what, I really don't want to go into management,
What changed?
then yeah, like just let them stay where they are, and we just like to promote and promote because sometimes it's the easiest path. Throw Matt in over there because I need somebody to cover the Southwest because my manager just left. He knows the territory. Throw him in there. Well, wait a minute. Matt said for the last whatever he doesn't want to go into management. He'll be okay. He's a team player. And then what happens? You go into that role, you get frustrated, and you leave.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah. No.
we all make those mistakes. We're humans, right? And the path of least resistance sometimes is take the top rep or whoever that is and throw them in the deep end because you need to fill a role rather than another thing. I think a best practice and kind of a little bit off the subject is, are you creating a virtual bench of who your next managers are? Where are they? Are they internal? Do you have people externally that you're nurturing to try and hopefully get them in the door? So this virtual bench concept, I think sometimes leaves you where you're not flat-footed when something like that happens. You've got a list of people that may be a succession plan for you down the road.
So virtual bench, ABR, always be recruiting, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
So I talk to leaders over the years, and they'll say, we'll talk about coaching, or we'll talk about recruiting. Like pick the topic, and they'll say something like, "Hey, Matt, listen. When I go to the board meeting, all the board cares about is the deal. All the board cares about is the number or the forecast." You sit in on those meetings. You have a different
Yeah.
perspective now. What do you say
Yeah.
to that CRO who thinks that all the board cares about is getting to the number and the deals?
Well, I mean, yes, performance is driven by the number. And I think you're still going to have to talk about the number. But my advice is, what is the narrative? I mean, when you're standing in front of a board, no matter what role you're in the organization presenting, is what story are you telling about here is where we are, here is where we're going, this is how we're getting there, and the number is part of it. But more importantly, this is how we're scaling. These are the things that I kind of think through is there's behavior changes I'm seeing in my team. There's leading indicators, there's lagging indicators, which is usually how I did against a number, a target, a quota, whatever. Leading is like, hey, here's the new opportunities. Pipeline is happening. We're getting the interlock with these teams. The behavior is, hey, we're getting new folks coming in the door. They're leveraging the call plan. They're using the sales process. There is a narrative that can be built where it is not just all about the number. And I think good executives understand the storytelling of how to get that in front of a board versus the one they're so focused on the number. And as soon as that number is down or is not where it needs to be, they default to being reactive, and they don't have a good story to tell. So I think a lot of good executives have to take a step back and figure out what that narrative looks like.
Have you ever had a situation or heard about a situation where the numbers were really good over, the short term, couple quarters in a row, but you're wondering, like, how the hell are they actually achieving the numbers? I don't feel like what I'm seeing here is matching the numbers that are being performed.
Well, I think there's that part of it. I think what I see more often is they're doing really well in a company, and my question is, what are you doing to get ahead of when there might be a slowdown, a headwind? We love to not make changes when things are going well, and I think the ones that are preparing to say, hey, you know what? Interest rates, inflation, name the industry, and where there's been a headwind, the ones who've kind of planned ahead are the ones that are going to be ahead of the game. Like, why disrupt the apple cart, right? Yeah. But to your question, I see the ones that are really good preparing. Now's a great time for us to look at, can we tweak our customer journey buying process, right? Can we compress our onboarding time? Can we get people onboarded quicker as a customer, right? What are the things we can do to drive even higher retention? Those are the types of things where I think if you're doing really well, you kind of shove them to the side because you don't. But I think some people always, the ones who know strategy execution, are thinking ahead a quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters. When I see somebody who's really doing well and I don't trust it, then I start to say, well, explain to me, like, what's working? If I was to duplicate this at another portfolio company or another company that we work with, or if I'm on another board, tell me what are the 5 or 6 things that are working really well? And I just sit back and ask and see what they would say. Yeah. And do they understand the business, or was it a bunch of bluebirds? Did something happen? Do they really understand their business as an executive, or are they just kind of coming in and reporting the news? I want to see the level of depth of how much they know about the business going forward.
Are you making the news, or are you reporting the news? Love it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let's pivot a little bit. Josh, so you're with Francisco Partners now. Can you tell the audience what does Francisco Partners do, and what do you love about doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, we're a leading tech investment firm. We look at technology companies. What I love about what I do is, as part of FPC Consulting, is we look and work with a lot of our executives on, getting better performance out of the organization. Where are some stucks that we can leverage that we've seen across, whether it's my role previous, whether it's across another portfolio company. What I think we do really well as an organization is, coming in and really being a collaborative environment with our executives, right? And working and coaching and advising and helping them kind of think through recommendations of how they get better. And that's kind of what I've done over the course of my years, right? Whether it was a consulting firm at SBI, when I was an operator at multiple technology companies, taking some of those learnings. I've been in those types of roles. I've been in that seat before. I've been in front of boards, and then leveraging that experience and helping the executives get better as they think about, just the performance of not just them, but also the organizations that they're running.
And Josh, when companies like FP, like not just like FP, I'm not saying FP, but companies like FP acquire a portfolio company, oftentimes there's concern. Oh, what do we do? Like, we're gonna have new management, new leadership, new boss. When you look back over the portfolio companies that you've experienced, what is an attribute of a senior sales leader that you've noticed that there's a trend, like that person who thinks about things this way or does this, that, or the other thing? those are the folks that thrive. Is there a pattern?
I think there's a couple things. I think I keep talking about the competencies. So if I think about competencies of successful leaders, I think the ones that can understand not just today and hitting a number, but more around understanding is the balance of strategy and execution, right? And what I mean by that is, do they see the big picture? And there's different points, and I use the analogy of a runner versus a builder. And so, if you're a leader that comes in and can you build something? Is this a level of maturity company where they need to build something? A new strategy, a new marketing org, a new sales org, whatever that looks like. Are they building something versus somebody who's a runner, who's coming in and inheriting something that's already been built? And so when you're looking at the company that we're acquiring or somebody's acquiring, you're looking first at where are they in the evolution of the maturity of that business, and that is it sales or marketing. Then what is the executive? Are they the right executive in the right role based on the competencies? Are they a runner? Are they a builder? How are they thinking through that? And if I've seen people that have been really successful, they own strategy, they own execution, they own it. If they're not performing, they don't make a lot of excuses. And they're actually the ones we talked about earlier. They're asking for coaching. Like, hey, here's some ideas for me. Like, Josh, can I bounce something off you? What have you seen in other areas? I think those are the ones that are opening up and they're saying, you know what, I don't know all the answers, but I know I can go get the help to get some of the things I need to get solved.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we want to avoid the folks who give the corporate salute, right? It's not me, it's them. Sales, it's marketing, it's operations.
It's marketing, yeah. Product, and
I'm sure you never heard any of that.
Never heard that.
So one of the first things you said to me when we met was, you're like, I just love coaching. That's almost verbatim what you said. And so people who love coaching and focus on it and do it well, care about it, they typically had that behavior modeled for them somewhere along the way. Maybe not. Who's someone whose coaching has had an impact on your career?
Yeah, I'd say somebody that had a big impact on me when I was at CA, Computer Associates, back in the day. The gentleman I reported, Jim Tedesco, he did a really nice job of some of the things I talked about, of being present in the conversations, right? Balancing the, hey, here's where I think you are as far as your really good skills. Here are some gaps, and then more importantly, asking me, where do you want to go as a leader? Me raising my hand and saying, hey, is there anything I can do? Books I can study, classes I can take. I remember taking Dale Carnegie back in the day, right, when that was a big thing. So just he invested in me because I had those conversations with him where he was asking me not just about deals and pipeline and forecast, which is important, but he also said, hey, where are you trying to go as an individual and as you grow your career? And I'll never forget that.
Awesome. And who's your favorite coach? I mean, when I say that, I'm thinking a name that a lot of people would know. It doesn't have to be sports; it could be. But just when I ask you that question, who's your favorite coach? Who comes to mind and why?
Yeah, a little while ago, I mentioned, I think Andy Reid does a really good job of being the players coach. Recently, I think someone who I think did a great job coaching, and I'm a Buckeye fan. I didn't go to Ohio State, but I root for the Buckeyes. I think Ryan Day, what he did coming out of the adversity of losing the Oregon game, then losing at Michigan at Ohio State, right? Everyone talking about what happened, and then him going through and kind of having his team put the noise aside. That is just I think coaching just at what they did as a team and what he brought his team through is more recent. Just was exciting to see that. And I think so. Andy Reid being a player's coach, and I think Ryan Day recently just kind of helping Ohio State kind of get through the noise, block it out, get the team to rally around each other. As you said, they get to write their own story now, and I think they did it. So those are two I'd say that I think just off the top of my head.
It's amazing how things ebb and flow. I mean, they wanted to crucify Ryan Day after that Michigan game.
Yeah.
And I remember leading up to the championship game, hearing on the radio, oh, it doesn't matter if they win the championship. Ohio Buckeye fans don't care about winning the championship. They just care about beating Michigan. Like, come on.
Yeah, I think that's a very small. It's probably a very small percentage of Ohio State fans that probably are thinking that way. So yeah, I mean, you got to put aside and this is, I think, relevant in a lot of organizations, you don't have a good quarter, right? Or you don't have a good month, right? What are you going to do different to not let it happen again, right? What are the learnings you captured? And now I think he can take those learnings, excuse me, and the team can take those learnings and apply that going forward, right? These players can now take that to when they have adversity in the NFL or their next, you always learn something, whether you win or lose, you're learning something. And it's how you apply those learnings going forward that I think is going to make you successful.
Nice. I got to ask, sports related, I guess there's a picture of a race car behind you. Is there a story behind that?
Well, I'm just a big Porsche fan, and I love the Gulf racing, the colors of the Gulf. And so that's just something my wife got me a couple of years ago. And I watched the Porsche racing, and I've just kind of always been into racing. And I just love the fact that, these are folks that are the pinnacle of what they do, and enjoy watching and driving Porsches. So
yeah, somebody just referred there's a documentary about F1 racing that's out there. I haven't seen it yet.
Drive to Survive is a great F1. Yeah, I've watched all the seasons.
Okay.
Watch F1 on TV. Yeah, it's good if you haven't seen it.
I got that on the list. The wife says zero interest, so I got to find my own time to watch that.
That's when you're on a plane and you've got your time. You just download a couple episodes in between doing work email. You watch an episode. That's kind of what I do.
Last question. If you were asked to give a TED talk, you're a short talk on one topic at, a sales kickoff, which I know you do, but you could pick the topic, any topic. What would be the topic and why?
Wow. One topic. I was at SKO this week. I would say the one topic for me for a TED talk would be, how do you help folks reach their full potential through the lens of that individual? And I think a lot of times when we help people reach their full potential or get the best out of them, we look at it through our lens. And so I think the conversation we've had around understanding who they are, type of person they are, and thinking through what's going to make them successful and helping them think about self-awareness, vulnerability, what are their pros, what are the cons, what are their skills, what are their, et cetera. I think that's where we get scale in organizations. I think that's where we get succession planning in organizations. And I think that's where a lot of times people get the most satisfaction, is because someone's investing in them. Like I talked about Jim years ago, he was looking through my lens and saying, hey, Josh, where do you want to go? Not where did he want me to go? Where did I want to go? And I think that'd be a cool topic.
Sign me up for that TED Talk. That's a fantastic topic, reaching full potential through their lens. Well, Josh, I think that's a good place to leave it. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about reaching potential, runners versus builders, no excuses, building a virtual bench, the pros and the cons of promoting the A player all the time, micro coaching, being present, having an agenda. I really, really appreciate the energy and the perspective that you brought to the conversation today.
No, this was great, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity. Great conversation. And, this weekend should be a good couple of NFL games. So we'll see if some of these coaches that are on the bench that might get promoted to their next teams should be a good weekend of football. So really appreciate the conversation and looking forward to the next episode. I listen in on this on your podcast. Great stuff.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And for everybody out there for watching and listening, thanks for doing that. Please, let's continue the conversation on social media. Subscribe on YouTube. Comment on LinkedIn. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you want to see more of. The goal is to help you do what you're already doing out there, just a little bit better and with a little bit less stress. You have the hardest job in your company. So thanks for investing your time with us. Hope you got something out of it. And until next time, coach them if you want to keep them.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Coach2Scale, How Modern Leaders Build Coaching Cultures. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at coachem.io. That's COACHEM.io. And follow us on Twitter at CoachEmNow. See you all next week. Thanks for joining. And remember, coach them if you want to keep them.